I think it's getting people to think about their relationship with alcohol, I think. And it doesn't necessarily, some of the changes may not be measurable, but over time, you do sense that people are thinking about it even more.
On this episode of the Don't Change Much podcast, we're joined by Dr. Sylvain Charlebois, widely known as the Food Professor. Dr. Charlebois is a professor of food distribution and policy at Dalhousie University and the director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab. He's an expert in the agri-food sector, offering insights that directly affect how we shop, eat, and live healthier lives. Today, we'll dive into key cultural shifts shaping Canadian health and wellness, the declining in alcohol consumption, the rise of cannabis as an alternative, and how these trends extend to our nutrition habits. Why are more men drinking less? How are these choices impacting how we view healthy living? Dr. Charlebois will help us unpack how these cultural changes are shaping what we eat, drink, and prioritize for a healthier life. I'm your host, Dan Murphy, and this is the Don't Change Much podcast. Dr. Charlebois, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us to talk on the Don't Change Much podcast. We're going to start with the loaded question. The Food Professor, what do you do?
Yeah. Well, we do a lot of things because we're a team, obviously. We have about anywhere between 15 to 20 people on our team. And we look at a variety of issues affecting food from farm gate to plate. We look at food service, we look at food retail, we look at what could disrupt our food systems. We look at policy changes, for example. I mean, most recently, the GST holiday issue, trying to figure out exactly how that could impact the food industry and, of course, consumers as well. The carbon pricing policy in Canada is another topic that we've looked into quite significantly in the last few months. There's always something going on. And of course, the big topic for us is food inflation, food prices. And we just released our 15th edition of Canada's Food Price Report just a few weeks ago. That is a forecast for food prices over the next 12 months. So we do some forecasting using AI. And we've been doing that for about 15 years now.
Food pricing is obviously a huge topic of conversation in our country and many countries. So what is the forecast about where food prices are going?
Oh, we've seen the last 12 months how many governments around the world have actually lost elections due to inflation and food inflation, because food inflation is real for everyone. Everyone eats, and most people will go to the grocery store on a regular basis. So they see how inflation is that extra tax that nobody wants to pay. And so for 2025, we're expecting a higher than average food inflation rate of 3 to 5%. Depending where you are in the country, it does vary. Ontario and West, you'll see probably a food inflation rate of about 3 to 4%. And Quebec East, 4 to 5% approximately. And the two categories that will drive food inflation higher in 2025 are meat products, and vegetables. Meat, the trifecta of meat, pork, beef, and chicken, all three of them will actually be more expensive in 2025, unfortunately, for meat lovers out there. And the vegetable situation will be largely impacted by a weaker Canadian dollar. That's what we're expecting in 2025. We just heard from the Bank of Canada a few weeks ago. It is cutting its benchmark, and typically when that happens, our dollar gets weaker versus the Canadian, versus the American dollar, which actually impacts our importers' buying power, unfortunately, and that impacts vegetables precisely.
Now we are with the Canadian Men's Health Foundation, so we want to talk about things other than food. You said everybody eats, so this is a topic that everybody has to pay attention to. But not everybody drinks, and are fewer people drinking than ever?
Oh, without a doubt, when you actually look at um, sales by volume across the country, clearly you're seeing liquor boards uh, panicking a little bit because, of course, liquor boards want to look good to the governments. They want to provide a hefty dividend to keep jobs and remain relevant to the public. So what we're seeing right now are increase in terms of dollar sales. I think most of them actually have higher sales, but when you actually start digging into each and every report across the country, I don't think there is one single province where sales by volume are up compared to last year. So you can clearly see that people are moving away from drinking alcohol, and speaking to some manufacturers, we all know that non-alcoholic beverages are becoming more popular, which is why liquor boards are starting to think about selling non-alcoholic beverages as well, just to actually keep up with their government's expectations when it comes to dividends. And so that's where we're at right now. But clearly, I think Canadians are drinking less. And there are several issues, of course. One is price. You don't need to drink to survive. So obviously people are just cutting back. Two, I think the health factor is an important one. I think people are concerned. There are more studies out there. I'm not a medical doctor personally, but I've actually read some of the recent reports about alcohol consumption, and yeah, we have a clearer idea of what are the health implications if you drink too much. And so I think people are starting to realize that perhaps it's time to cut back.
Are these decisions gender specific? Like, do you notice it more with men than women, or is it across the board?
Not necessarily men, women, but generational. Absolutely, I think generations you're seeing a different picture from one generation to another. The younger generations are absolutely getting their alcohol fix in another way, I guess. And of course, the legalization of cannabis is probably something that is being, I would say, socialized, because, of course, for most generations, the millennials, Gen Z, Gen X's, and boomers, we all grew up in an environment where cannabis was illegal, and so drinking it was a natural thing to do when during social events and at hockey games and things like that. But with the arrival of cannabis, it's been basically 5 years now. It's being socialized way more, and I think that's probably one way that kids are looking into doing something when they actually are with friends and family. But also, I think they're just probably moving away from drugs and alcohol altogether and just doing other things than just drinking and smoking.
I think we're of the same vintage, our generation, and we always used to see people dry January or sober October. Are these things that are taking a bigger foothold for people?
I think it's getting people to think about their relationship with alcohol, I think. And it doesn't necessarily, I think some of the changes may not be measurable, but over time, you do sense that people are thinking about it even more. And it's kind of ironic because in some parts of the country, many people think if you actually make alcohol more readily available, you'll actually entice people to drink more, which is kind of the case in Ontario, for example. With the Ford government, clearly you're seeing a government basically copying what has been happening in Quebec for decades, really. The privatization of alcohol distribution has been around. It's part of the culture. And in Quebec, also, you're seeing a decline in alcohol consumption. And my guess is that it'll be the same in Ontario. So you're seeing that discipline in the marketplace that you haven't seen before, which is interesting. I think it's catching a lot of people, particularly industry, off guard a little bit, and that's why you're seeing major CPG companies invest more in non-alcoholic beverages right now.
So if people are making these decisions, obviously based on economics, but also because of health, when we see people limiting their alcohol intake, does that spill over into other parts of the lives in terms of health benefits, in terms of nutrition, eating habits? Do you think these are things that coexist because of each other?
I think the industry is trying to figure out, well, okay, so if people aren't drinking as much, what else are they drinking? What else are they going to be consuming? Is it being replaced by something else, or they're just cutting altogether? And this is something that I think the industry is really struggling with right now. And of course, I think we also need to talk about this other phenomena called the GLP-1s, the Ozempic phenomena. I think in 2024, 2024 was a big year for Ozempic, and we're just working on a paper right now. Clearly, it gets people to drink less. As soon as you drink one beverage, too many, you'll feel sick, you'll feel ill in 60% of the time. And so it really pushes people not to drink as much. And we are expecting by 2030 to see over 4 to 5 million Canadians using a GLP-1 drug. And in America, it could actually exceed 30 million by 2026. So those numbers are incredible. That's a lot of people using a medication that could actually push them away from drinking alcohol in the first place. So I think the industry, and we've spoken to a few CPG companies, the industry overall is really trying to figure things out here. How will the market look like with higher prices? Because going back to the board situation, boards will need to make money. So they will charge you more for that bottle of wine. They will charge you more for that beer so they can actually increase those dividends. So if slowly but surely these products are being priced out of the market, people will go elsewhere. And on top of that, if you're seeing a marketplace not wanting to drink at all, well, you got to figure out exactly what else you're going to offer to the market.
So what's the potential footprint then of these non-alcoholic beverages, you think, Sylvain? Like what's the growth been like, year over year?
Double digits. Of course, it's hard to know for sure, but I've spoken to companies like Keurig Dr. Pepper, Pepsi, Coca-Cola. They all have products in that space, and not one single company have not told me that they're not in double digit growth territory. So people are buying. Of course, the market share of that segment is very slim, but it's growing. It's growing immensely. And frankly, I think there are two things happening right now. So one, companies are recognizing that there is a potential, there is a shift in the market from alcohol to non-alcoholic beverages. But two, I think products are getting better. Mm-hmm. I mean, 7 years ago, it's these products were terrible, which is not good at all. But now they're much better than they used to. In food service, though, you can feel that there's still that culture of selling booze, getting people drunk so they can spend more in establishment. We see that. Yeah. Okay, restaurants will encourage people to drink so they can make more money. We get it. We all understand that. But at some point, restaurants, food service establishments will have to think about making money while not making people drunk. That's a concept that is in progress right now.
How have restaurants been impacted then with the dip in people consuming alcohol? Has it made a big impact on them?
It's hard to tell, but overall, I would say that right now, sales in restaurants are actually almost at a record high. And so it's been incredible. And of course, with the GST holiday going on until February, that is likely to shift a lot of business from retail to service, because in some provinces you're saving 15%. So that's a lot to save on, and my guess is that people will actually go out in December, January, February, but will they actually drink more? Who knows? But it could, that 15% in some provinces, if you're saving 50%, people will say either, well, that's my tip, or that's my glass of beer, or that's my glass of wine, for example. And so it's on the house, paid by the government, if you will. It's unclear to me how that will be substituted. But my guess is that there's going to be a lot more business at restaurants. But will people drink more? That's the thing. And of course, if you go out, you have that notion that you have to be responsible, you can't drive and things like that. And people, and it all depends on the social context as well, with whom you were with. I can tell you that with work-related meetings at restaurants, people are drinking less and less. They want to be sharp, they want to perform, they want to do well, and so they're less likely to drink as before 10 years ago, if you will.
Well, what about just like regular social events, parties, dinner parties, like these trends? They've got to affect that type of thing as well. If people are, their goal is to have a healthier lifestyle and to save a little bit of money.
Absolutely. And I think that I think COVID really got people to think about their health. And by the way, the Ozempic phenomena is very much related to COVID. I mean, people all of a sudden wanted to be in shape. They're going to the doctors and they ask them, I need to lose some weight. I need to feel in shape. Well, stop. And I suspect that during that conversation, there is a mention about alcohol consumption. And so people are thinking about their relationship with alcohol way more than before, because the alcoholic factor in people's lives will impact, like, not just their health, but their relationship with family and friends and work and all that. And by the way, I mean, right now, the job market is not all that friendly and robust. We're starting to see people losing their jobs, and some people are under a lot of pressure. They have to keep 2-3 jobs. How can you possibly drink when you're under that pressure? And if you lose your job because of your performance, well, it's going to be harder for you to actually get a new job. So people keep that in mind whenever they go out, or if they think about, maybe I'm drinking a little bit too much at home or on the road or whatever. I actually do think that economic pressures beyond pricing are absolutely real for people.
Public health messaging. Are people paying more attention to it now, or are these just informed decisions they're making on their own alcohol and cannabis?
That's a good question. I mean, I think we're at the beginning of a new era. Of course, we all saw what happened with cigarettes, but cigarettes do kill. I mean, I think the studies were pretty clear. Alcohol won't kill if consumed in moderation. I think the word moderation is something that will need nuance, some nuance down the road, because for some people, drinking in moderation may actually mean 15 drinks a week.
Yeah.
Which was the former guidelines. Now guidelines are much more restrictive. And you see a lot of public awareness around driving and drinking, of course, and of course with the consumption of cannabis. We've seen that a lot. But will we see, for example, labels on products at retail? I don't know, but my guess is that we need to be a little bit careful here. Alcohol is not like cigarettes. I mean, I'm a big proponent of food culture and traditions. And alcohol is not something that is new in our lives. It's been around for centuries, thousands of years, whereas tobacco, I mean, it was around for a while, but the tobacco that we were smoking in the last 50 years is not the same product at all. It wasn't natural at all. It was the nicotine really destroyed people's lives and killed people. But to change that culture, or to actually make people feel guilty that they're buying a product that could kill them or kill their loved ones, I'm not sure it's the right move. But awareness campaigns, I think, are absolutely important. I think it's important to remind people of the risks involved, because in the research we're seeing there is an evolution. We know more because there's more money poured into that sector to understand risks, public health risks, and that's a good thing. And those studies need to be conveyed to the public.
You mentioned the guidelines, and there was a shift in the guidelines. I'm not sure how many years ago. It might have been last year. How did you interpret that? Why do you think that the number changed so dramatically?
I would say, I'd say that at the beginning I was skeptical. Then I went and I started to read some of these studies, and it's pretty clear. I mean, it's pretty clear. There are some risks. Cancer, for example, that's a big one, related to alcohol consumption. And so I can understand guidelines. I just think they went severe too quickly. It was too much of a change, which is why too much is like not enough. They went too far, and people are saying, yeah, why bother? We're not. So they actually, in fact, to me, that shift was so severe that it undermined the importance of the guidelines to me.
Mm.
That's not necessarily what you want.
Yeah. Because, I mean, there are people that are still going to drink that we still need, correct messaging for. So I'm guessing when it comes to people that are still going to consume alcohol, it's the old moderation is the key. Is that what you're preaching?
I would say so, absolutely. And I think it's important for people to understand that there are some risks. There are some risks in eating anything. If you eat anything not in moderation, it could become a risk. It's the same with alcohol. It's important, and that's why I think I've always believed that the edible situation with cannabis is a missed opportunity for Canada. I do think that the next Cannabis Act should be looser and more accommodating for the food industry to allow itself to offer more edibles to the Canadian public. And there's only one thing you can do, or you could do, is to actually consider edibles as food, not a drug. Because right now, the reason why it's so restrictive, and this is by design by Health Canada, is that if you actually put some cannabis into anything, any food, muffins, chocolate bars, doesn't matter. It is considered as a drug in the eyes of the Act, and which is why Health Canada would be responsible, and they only have 80 inspectors. Whereas the CFIA, if you consider a cannabis-infused food product as food, then you would allow 3,400 inspectors to oversee the facilities that we have in Canada. So that would actually be helpful. It would actually normalize the whole process of manufacturing edibles, in my view, anyways.
How do you stay up to date with this ever-shifting sector you work in? I mean, it seems to be changing daily, for goodness sakes.
I read a lot. And like I said, I have a good team. And honestly, whenever something happens, I do have a good relationship with media, and that's been incredibly helpful, because the media will call me and ask me questions. Yeah. But as a scientist, I'm trying to figure out, okay, why is this reporter asking me this question like right now? And so when you start digging deeper into the reasoning behind the question itself, that's when you end up with some really interesting research paths. And of course, data is the big thing for me as a researcher. How do you get to the right data? And because a lot of things are said in the media that have no sense, no sense at all. But whenever I speak, I try to make sure it's supported by data as much as possible. So I'm obsessed with data. And so if I say something, I need data. If I write an op-ed, I need some data in there, or else it's just an opinion.
Yeah.
And my job is not just to offer an opinion, it's to offer an opinion based on facts.
Yeah. I think that, whether it's a journalist or just a regular person, if they're asking questions, it's usually, I'm asking the question because how does it affect me, my pocketbook, my health? But I think you're trying to provide information to people that aren't asking those questions, give the information to allow people to look inwards and say, okay, how is this affecting me?
Exactly. And so as a scientist, of course, my job is to publish and get it peer reviewed out there, and then take that, translate it, and to make sure that people understand what we're doing. And why? Because, well, you pay my salary. You're my boss. If at the end of the day, the work that we do is not understandable or doesn't provide value to people, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing?
Yeah. Well, I think we're getting close here. You know that the podcast is called Don't Change Much, and we always ask our guests what that phrase means to them. Making small changes, incremental changes that can ultimately make big changes. So when you hear "don't change much," what would you think that message would be for young men or men?
It's discipline. I mean, that's the discipline is really what I think what drives me, and I'm hoping that it will drive more young folks out there, because and I say that to my kids, I say that to my students. People who succeed never give up. You don't have to go to school to know that. You just don't give up. Just if you believe in something, just keep on working at it. And for that, you need discipline. You need to believe in yourself. You need to believe what you're doing. And I use myself as an example. I've been criticized like many times. Once you go public these days, you're exposed, and you get every day you get nasty emails, nasty postings on social media accusing you of all sorts of things that's not true. But at the end of the day, if you believe in what you're doing, you will continue, and good things happen to people who never ever give up.
Where can people find out more about you and your work?
Essentially, just go on Google like everyone else, and Google the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University, and you'll find our website, and all of our reports are there, and they are free, and they're available in both English and French.
This was a very formative discussion for me, very interesting. I think, like I said, you could take this conversation in a number of different ways and make it last for hours, but I think this was a great introduction into you and your role and what you do and how it impacts the lives of everyday Canadian and everyday Canadian men. So we thank you for your time and for your work.
My pleasure. You take care.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Don't Change Much podcast. If you found today's conversation helpful, share it with a friend or leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. For more resources and tips to support your health or the health of a loved one, visit menshealthfoundation.ca, and don't forget to click the follow button to join us each month for another inspiring episode of the Don't Change Much podcast.